to Geek Girls. I'm Mika.
I'm Nika.
Today we will be discussing and reviewing The Flash, Season 4, Episode 1, entitled Flash Reborn.
There will be spoilers for this episode, so please be warned. If you've not seen the first episode, you may want to save this until you get a chance to watch it. The Flash is one of my favorite shows out of all the superhero shows on DC TV. Where we would find our superheroes and their family members with the return of Season 4 being that Barry was swept up into the Speed Force, and if he would be back in this episode or in another episode. So as we go through our notes, you'll definitely get the answer to that as well as our thoughts.
Okay, so the show starts off with Barry still stuck in the Speed Force 6 months later. At this point, Julian has gone back home. Caitlin is working at a dive bar, and Vibe, along with Kid Flash, are trying to hold down the city as far as crime. Joe is assisting them with this, and then Iris is back at the home base Star Labs, giving them support from there, trying to stay busy and not think too much on Barry and how things ended there with him. Alright, so they're all coping with this loss. They're trying to move forward. However, pretty much a few scenes in, Samurai shows up and demands to see the Flash or he will destroy the city. Pretty much simple. Nothing outside of that. I kind of like how they threw in with Wally speaking Japanese and all that, but that's in a different direction. So, Cisco then goes to find Caitlin to help himself, Wally, and Joe track down and bring back Barry from the Speed Force. Iris basically was against it, so he needed outside help from them. And he kind of dropped a mention of people within the DCU to help trick the Speed Force into thinking that Barry is still there in order to get him back. So their first attempt failed, or at this point we think it failed, but we find out soon after that it didn't. We now see Barry, he's on the other side of town, running around. He stopped, I think a truck came along or something. The police ends up picking him up. Then everyone gets called there because, what's her name? Cecile. Joe's girlfriend calls and lets them know that Barry's there. When they arrive, Barry is pretty much not the Barry that we know and love. He's saying different references from previous shows. He's saying things from the future, which obviously during the 6 months that he was in the Speed Force, he experienced all things, including the future, with him mentioning, I think he said something about Pampers. Okay? So, knowing that Barry wasn't in his correct mind to be the Flash, they attempt to trick Samurai with Wally, but he knows the difference, so that doesn't go as long as planned.
On the note, though, of Barry coming out of the Speed Force, he starts writing all of these symbols and different things on the walls everywhere. Windows, doesn't matter. He just has his pen and he's writing. He's just like, I guess maybe on a beautiful mind type wavelength. Several things came to mind when I saw that. I thought that the words that he was writing, or the symbols that he was writing, looked Kryptonian, and it also looked like the language of the Legion of Superheroes. I can't remember the name of it now off the top of my head, but they have their own language. It's like Idic or I have to look that up. But those two things came to mind when I saw that. And then on the references, I'm going to talk about it when we get to our predictions, but I actually think that some of those references that he mentioned will come into play with future episodes. Like they might be referencing other villains that they might have to deal with in season 4. Or even some things that may transpire in seasons down the line. But I think all of that's going to reference something. Right now, they think it's all gibberish, but when we get down to the nitty gritty and we finally see the big bad, which we'll talk about later, I think that this episode is going to call back those things to mind. Even maybe the expression, "this house is bitching." That may have to do with something, like maybe somebody may say that, or whatever. So I definitely think that everything has its own reference.
Okay, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Let's see. Okay, so that's when they realized that they couldn't use Barry to be the Flash, so then they Wally suggests, okay, well, I can do it. But he gets there, the samurai knows the difference. So when the 24-hour deadline ends, which is what the samurai gave them, Iris takes it upon herself to sacrifice herself pretty much because she knows and has faith that regardless of what Barry is going through and what mind he's in, he will always come and save her. So Joe goes to Barry and tells him that she's in trouble when she does that. And this brings him back immediately. Okay? Barry is the fastest he's ever been. He defeats the samurai in like 2.5 seconds. Then we see that it's a robot with the message, "Welcome home, Barry." Really, really cryptic. I didn't like that at all. And that's pretty much the end. Now, go to Cisco at the lab, I believe, is when he invites Caitlin to basically come back with her job, come back to the fam and everything. Everyone's back together now. She goes to quit and runs into a real a-hole there. And he gives her a hard time about quitting, and that's when Killer Frost starts to come out. We see that she is not able to manage it. She's kind of like, oh no, and she's trying to dial it down. And basically that just does not work at all. So,
and side point to that, we see that guy in the bar several times during this episode, and he mentions a name. And that name referenced an actual villain that we should probably see this season called the Blacksmith. She is a villain that usually comes into play with the main villain for season 4, which I'm not going to mention until you cover that person's name, and then I can go from there. But that was exciting because that pretty much gave us that heads up that we're definitely going to see her on this season, let alone the fact that we know that she's already been cast. But if we didn't know that by hearing the name, we know that we would actually get a chance to see her.
Okay. All right. Then after Caitlin's situation, it goes to Barry and Iris. They're returning back to their life, of course, and he's getting acclimated to that. The last scene, that's when we realize that the Thinker is the villain, and he's who sent the samurai, which then pieces it all together to give us the realization that he set up this whole crazy scheme, all for them to basically bring Barry back out of the Speed Force and the challenges that he has set up for the team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because in most of the comic book arcs, the Thinker always has a plan of wanting to make the world a better place, and that normally involves some type of superheroes to do that. And in most cases, it involves the Flash. And the Thinker is the type of villain where he is the mastermind. You don't really see him all the time, but he's the mastermind. I do like where they're going with his look. It's more or less like a combination of several different iterations of the Thinkers from the comic books. The closest one probably would be the Jeff Johns version of the Thinker, because that one kind of had more of a brainiac kind of RoboCop look to him, so to speak, in the comic book. So I'm definitely excited to see where this goes. Do you want to take maybe a minute or so to talk about predictions for where we think the next episodes or maybe the series is going to go?
As far I will fully agree with you what you said with his ramblings of the future. I believe that's predictions of the rest of the season. And that's pretty much it. I just want to see how that's going to come into play and what all is going to happen with the repercussions of them bringing out Barry as early as they did for Speed Force.
I think that ultimately the code will be what they have to use in order to defeat the Thinker. And so I don't know if the code is going to be what they use to create something, or if that code will be something that will turn into how, actual scenes or different information that they'll use to do it. But somehow I think the code that he's been using when he came out of the Speed Force is going to be ultimately how they're going to defeat the Thinker. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to a close. We know this one was a little bit longer than our normal videos, but we did have a lot of information to cover for this first episode of The Flash. If you are excited that The Flash is back, if you've seen the first episode, please give us your thoughts below. If you haven't watched the season 4 premiere, once you do so, then leave your comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay geeky.
Stay geeky.